welcome to Android Dialogues, where we have bite-sized conversations with people in the Android community. I'm Huyen and I'm speaking with
Miquel Beltran.
And we're currently in Chicago for Chicago Roboto, where both Miquel and I are speaking. Miquel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome.
Where are you based, and how did you get started in Android?
Yeah, I'm based in Berlin, and I got started in Android when I moved to Berlin, actually. I joined a company, and I was a C++ developer, but they were doing a video player for Android, and then I had to work on their video player and on the NDK side also.
Oh wow!
So it was very deep, low level.
Yeah.
And by the time I moved into doing apps, which is a bit more funny also as well.
Yeah.
And also you interact more with people and with the users, so it's way better. It's more B2C, let's say, to customers, and so. Yes.
Well, it's funny you mentioned like being user-facing, because actually the topic of your talk is something that is extremely user-facing.
Yes, I'm talking about emoji.
I think it's a really fascinating subject, and I coincidentally, before asking Miquel to talk with me on this, ended up doing some work with emojis at work, and I found out that emojis are this really interesting subject on mobile. This might seem like an obvious question, but Miquel, what are emojis?
Well, the emoji comes from Japan, from 1999, and it was a manufacturer that was adding little drawings to the messages that users were interchanging. And at that time there was no standard, there was no anything. They just like drawing a little icon, 12 by 12 pixel monochrome, when they were sending messages, and you could use this. And this on the time evolved into what is emoji today, which is adding pictures like ideograms or like that can represent an object or an emotion into text also.
Yes, emotions. I coincidentally have some emojis right here, so kind of something like this, so emotions. Now, I think it's really interesting. And so emojis, are they more of a, they're not really so much images as text, or is that correct? Or how are they represented like digitally?
They are represented by codes inside. So let's say the same as characters, the same like the H and the E character, and so they are numbers in the inside. They are so UTF numbers or maybe characters or so. And emoji, they have the same. So they share the same kind of encoding, and they are come all together into what is the Unicode.
And what I think is really, really interesting is that there's like this whole complicated and complex, but very kind of regulated with lots of rules, a very like regulated system for rendering emojis or defining emojis. And I think that's actually one of the interesting challenges when you work with them. It's not just an easy, okay, well, 1 is a smiley, 2 is like a sad face. There's actually a very complex system in there. Have you run into that at all when you're working with emojis at your job?
Yes, exactly. And it has been quite surprising to see how little support that you get from the operating system when you are doing these things. So just imagine that you have a string with lots of emoji in it, and you want to cut this string in two. So what happens if you just cut in the middle of an emoji? Because that's the thing. One emoji can be composed by more than one code point. So just imagine that if you're going to cut this string in the middle and you cut the emoji in the middle, you may be rendering something completely different or something which is wrong. The same problem happens with Twitter, for example. No? You want to send a tweet and you start typing things, and then you want to add an emoji, and pop, all the characters are gone, all the characters that you had left. And that's because one single emoji can take the same space as 7 or even 11 characters in some cases. So
can you tell us why that is? Like, why isn't it just simply that there's like a one-to-one correlation for an emoji and a code point? Well, a code point is basically just a numeric value assigned to an emoji, right? Is that correct? Or it's always so confusing to me. Like,
it's confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing. What is a code point, and why is it that emojis aren't just like a one-to-one mapping of, say, a hexadecimal value to this character or ideogram?
So an emoji can be one or more code points.
Okay.
You can have emoji which are created by composing other emoji. So for example, the classic example is the emojis which have a person which has a profession, no? Which is a developer. So you can have, for example, the woman emoji, then you can have a skin tone modifier, then you can have an object, like for example, a laptop, and altogether it gets like rendered like a developer, for example.
Which is why, like you said, on Twitter, sometimes the character count might be not quite what you expect it to be because it's counting each of those code points as a different character.
Well, it's not even counting code points.
Oh, really?
Because a code point can be longer or shorter depending on the encoding that you're using.
Oh my
so you
gosh.
have UTF,
right.
you can have UTF-8 or UTF-16, and the length of the data will be different for the same code point.
Okay, so that's already kind of really complicated. Just talking about Unicode, what does emoji support look like on Android? Because I know at some point, I forgot which version of Android, but there was like widespread emoji support. But it seems like we still get, depending on what version of Android you're on, you might still get the what do they call it? The tofu.
Yes.
So can you explain to us like maybe like what emoji support on Android looks like, and also what's the tofu?
What's the tofu? So the tofu is this square that you will see when you are trying to see an emoji that your system is not supporting. So in that case, the system will render just a square with an X in the middle. That is called tofu, and it's very funny why it's called tofu, and because it looks like a tofu,
yeah,
but
like
also the font from Google is called Noto, because they call it's a font for no tofus.
Oh, cool! I did not know that. That's really awesome. Oh, like so in terms of like if I take like just any version of Android, am I only gonna get like a certain amount of emojis, or is there what are my risks of seeing tofus on different levels of Android?
So the problem has always been that your level of support is tied to the version of the operating system that you have. So if your users are still using API 16, let's say, they are gonna see this black and white emoji that we had before, which were like little androids.
Yeah.
And then the blobs came, but there was the blobs that were looking sideways, and then there are the blobs that are looking in the front also as well, so they are different again.
Right.
And then you have finally the round faces, I will call it, that they come with Oreo, with Android 8.
I still miss the blobs, so I was a blob fan. So what can we do about this? Like obviously like when we're dealing with like emoji kind of related features, and this is, I guess, kind of that typical Android problem is how do we support things through different levels? Like what can we do? Like are we stuck with different emoji sets on different versions, or like how do we, I guess, make emojis work better across different API versions?
So what all big apps have done so far is to have their own emoji set.
Okay.
They implement emoji by themselves fully, like WhatsApp. And also Facebook, for example. Even Facebook, they had two different emoji sets. They had one for the app and one for the messenger.
Oh, wow.
They have unified that now.
Okay.
There's this funny case, right? You are so big that you can afford having two different emoji sets. And this is what traditionally happened. So you know that the operating system is not going to bring you what you want. So for example, WhatsApp, they were using the same emoji as in Apple.
Okay.
And they were just implementing everything by themselves. And for the rest of us, let's say small companies and small teams and and there has been libraries. There have been libraries, but we were missing something from Google.
Right.
And then it's when it was announced in Google I/O this year. And Kotlin was great. The announcement of Kotlin was great, but I was already using Kotlin, so it was like, it's okay.
All right, fine.
It's okay. But when they announced Emoji Compat, I said, yes, I'm going to throw away so much code in my project with this. And yes, it's Emoji Compat from the support library. It's actually bringing you pretty much everything you need for supporting emoji.
So before, you might have to say, I don't know, like import your own font, like bundle your own font maybe, or have special handling. But now we have a support library that does it for us.
Yes.
How does it, can you kind of just tell us generally, how does Emoji Compat work?
Yes. So Emoji Compat, what it does is it uses a font file internally. It uses this Noto color emoji version from Google. And it will look for emoji inside your strings, but it will look for emoji that you cannot render. And then it will put it's called an emoji span in that exact tofu that is displaying, and it will use the font for displaying the missing emoji in it.
Oh, wow. So it's actually very selective. It can tell like, oh, you're on like X version of Android. You don't have this particular fancy emoji. Here's like, and so it wraps it in a span. Oh, that's really cool. So it's introducing a new kind of span, and then it's able to process that span?
Yes.
And apply like Noto to that span. Oh, that is so cool. Is this related to the downloadable fonts at all?
Yes, also. So you can use downloadable fonts or you can use the bundled fonts. And if you use the downloadable fonts, which I recommend fully, your users will get also updates when they fix the emoji. So there was this thing of the cheeseburger, that the cheese was at the bottom.
I remember that.
And they fix it.
Yeah.
So when they push the fix to the open, because this project is on GitHub also. You can follow on GitHub the project where they have all the emoji from this font. And users were getting the update also. So you don't have to deploy a new app or anything. Is all the fixes that happen in Emoji Compat, your users will get them also.
Oh, that's so cool. And I think that's a really good example of like, you know, sometimes it's hard on Android. You know, we always worry about backwards compatibility. But I think this is one feature where we have a big win, where we can really future-proof our apps. And I think there's like actually some new emojis that got announced this year, like I think kangaroos and like things like that. So hopefully when the kangaroo emoji comes to Noto, I can get kangaroo emojis on my phone pretty easily. So that's really, really cool. Do you have any other just general advice before we leave off? Do you have any general advice on, say I want to, I don't know, implement some kind of emoji functionality, like I want to do my own version of reactions or do like inline emoji. What are your kind of first steps for approaching emojis on Android?
Yes. So I think it's good to have a good dictionary of emoji. So in this case, what I would recommend is to look into the EmojiOne library. This is an open source library, and they have a free version of the library and a paid version of the library. But with the free version, you get also already all PNGs of all the emoji that you can use in your project. And also they have a huge JSON that it has all the emoji. It has also this thing called short names, which is like what Slack is using for matching emoji to what people write.
Right, so like +1, thumbs up.
Exactly.
Right, okay, cool.
Exactly. And they have a very good dictionary. You can use this JSON for building your own solution, your own custom solution. So look for these sets that exist online and then go ahead and implement it by yourself, because what I found is that the libraries that are providing a solution, they may be not supporting the latest Unicode, but in this case, if you get the latest Unicode, you get the dictionary and you implement it by yourself, you will have total control of that.
Actually, it's a good point you bring up about like PNGs and images, because I feel like I've seen a few solutions where, you know, there's like I guess there's like a trade-off between like, say, using images to represent emojis versus using like Unicode and trusting the text rendering to use it. Have you ever like had experience with either of those, like using...
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, obviously the trade-off is, I think, and I ran into this myself, is that when you use images, they kind of just work, right? You don't have to worry about, like, level of Unicode support, but then it's, like, a whole bunch of, like, images in your Android, like, possibly bundled in your APK or downloaded from the web, whereas, like, if you go with the text version, you have to deal with all the Unicode stuff. Like, do you have any kind of tips on, like, when each solution might work for you, like images versus Unicode and Emoji Compat?
Yes. The first solution that we had, we were using the EmojiOne set. And that's because on the website we use also EmojiOne.
So you wanted
we wanted to have the same emoji, and this has been proved that when people see emoji in a different way, and if depending on the operating system that you have, even depending if you have Samsung or if you have LG or you have a Google phone, you're gonna see different emoji.
Yeah.
And some people get the reactions differently.
Really?
There is one face, which is, I think, is the greening face.
Yeah, yeah.
That looks very different on Apple devices than on the Google devices. And you might send it to an Apple user and they will see it like a negative thing. And you send it to a Google user and they see it with a positive thing. So when you need to have exactly the same pictures, you want to have the same pictures on all your platforms, then it's the way to go. It's the way to go.
Interesting. And I think that's actually a really good point too. And talking about emojis, like, what do they mean? Because that's like that's almost like that's a UX issue, isn't it? Like, what does it represent, not just on like an Android device, but on your iOS client or on the web? So emojis are hard, y'all. Emojis are really, really hard. So there's like technical perspective, there's like the UX perspective, there's like logistics of how are you actually going to implement it. But if you are handling emojis at work and you're like me and you're tearing your hair out for a little bit, you should definitely check out Miquel's talk. And I believe the Chicago Roboto talks will be recorded.
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they will, because I know I will be probably watching Miquel's talk over and over again as I deal with emojis. And if y'all are dealing with, that sounds kind of negative, because emojis are fun. But if y'all are finding some kind of challenges implementing emojis on Android, you should definitely check out Miquel's talk. Miquel, if people wanted to find you on the internet, how can they do that?
The best place is on Twitter. So you can find it on my handle. You can look for Miquel Beltran, or I will put the link to my
we'll have a little bar like right about here on the screen, so people can find you on Twitter and ask you questions about emojis.
Yes, always. My DMs are always open. You can ask me any question about this or any other talks that I gave or blog posts that I wrote, or anything that you need.
Awesome. We'll definitely go find Miquel. And well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me here.
Oh, it was so much fun. And this is like a topic I love. I mean, like, really, like, who knew, right?
It gives for... You can be talking about this for a long time.
It is. We were talking for a while before the camera started rolling. But definitely, like, if you're thinking about emojis on Android, check out Miquel. And we'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.